All right, so we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Angie Hauser, and I'm the Continuing Education Coordinator for the North Dakota State Library. And I'm happy to introduce you to Janet Anderson, who is the Director of the Minot Public Library in Minot, North Dakota. And she's here to speak with us today about circulating unique collections. So I'll hand it over to you, Janet.
Thanks, Angie. Can everyone hear me okay? Angie, you can hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Fantastic. Well, as Angie said, I'm with the Minot Public Library in Minot, North Dakota. And primarily I want to talk to people today about our tool library, which was the first in the state. And we've learned some really good lessons. And I hope that the information I have today will be informative. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And Angie can interrupt me at any time to ask those questions. So I'm going to start a little bit with our background. First of all, the city of Minot serves a population of about 50,000, but we also serve outside of our city and into our county. We started unique collections, as most of you know. It's not a new thing to libraries, but what is unique is certainly changing as the times change, and throughout the state, throughout the country, throughout the world, you can find examples such as instruments and sewing machines and baking pans, seeds, and all sorts of great things that libraries check out to their patrons. In 2017, the American Libraries magazine had this great infographic showing just a sampling of some of the unique items checked out by libraries. Again, it's not a new idea. In reading the library book, which was a popular nonfiction book that came out this year, this went back all the way to the late 1800s and early 1900s, where libraries were thinking about checking out sports equipment to youth. So a few sites here, and I know that Angie will make this available, a few sites that are interesting. The American Libraries magazine article is the top one. The Library of Things is the Sacramento Public Library, and we actually used that a little bit to help us in our tool library. And then one that I'm especially intrigued by is the Human Library, but we haven't quite gotten that far here in Minot. So what are some of the things that we circulate that are considered unique? We actually started in 2010 with the infrared thermometers and power check meters, which I think several libraries throughout the state and possibly the country were doing, because this was provided through Xcel Energy with everything provided to the libraries. However, I will say there was very little ongoing internal promotion, hardly any training to our staff. It had the most unusual circulation period for us. It was, most of our items are 3 weeks, and this was 2 weeks. So it was really hard to promote and didn't really go very well. So we moved from that to circulating e-readers, which was another grant that we provided through the state library. The idea behind this was to get more people using Overdrive, basically. We wanted our patrons to be able to see how easy it was to download ebooks. And so we started with some iPads, a Nook Color, and a Kindle Reader. And that eventually became a little more high tech. We realized that people wanted to check out e-readers for more than just that. So we went more toward tablet with internet capability. We now have iPads and Kindle Fires primarily that are able to be checked out, and we download all of our library related apps to them and a few news magazines, that kind of thing. So that was probably one of the biggest undertakings that we had to date, was just figuring out how to make this so it was safe too. People were using them sometimes to log on to personal sites like emails or social media, and we had to make sure that our staff were logging people out and information was not being saved. we went from e-readers to circulating makerspace items as part of our digital makerspace. In 2015, we received an Otto Bremer grant to open a digital makerspace with emphasis on technology. So part of that was we wanted to be able to provide technology that people could take home with them. And the state library does a lot of this. We had great resources from the state as far as what was available, and also checking some of the things out ourselves. So we started with a lot of the items that you see here, and a lot of it was hit or miss. Again, it goes a lot back to staff training. Some of these were simple, and some of them, like the Arduino and even the Makey Makey, were a little more intricate to understand, and the Raspberry Pi was almost just above our over our heads to begin with. So again, we tested a lot of this out. Many of these are still extremely popular and checked out. And then we moved to the tool library. So the city of Minot had a historic flood in 2011. One of the great things that came from that, though, was a resiliency program, which involved some support from volunteers through the AmeriCorps Vista program. We had 2 years worth of AmeriCorps Vistas here in Minot, and their goal was to help promote resiliency. So they approached us with the idea of a tool lending program. They did a lot of the research and helped us kind of develop a list of some of the things that they felt would be most supportive of that kind of mission, which was to help people become more resilient. However, it was not quite as easy as maybe they had hoped. I think we knew we were getting into a little bit more, but there were a lot of things that we learned from this experience. And some of this, I will tell you honestly, maybe we didn't do so well, and some things we did really well. So the first thing was for us to determine whether or not we needed a unique collection. We had to ask, do the people in the community want this? Is there a need for it? And how are we going to validate these expenses? And we'll talk about finances a little bit more, but we were very, very easily able to say, this is something people need. And to be honest, I think a lot of communities would see that, because you hear so much about people who are doing home improvement projects and they need a tool. And they need it just at one time, but it's an expensive tool. So it was pretty easy for us to understand right from the start that a tool library would be something that was needed. But then you get to the money element of that. We have been very fortunate in obtaining grant money and donations for our unique collections. But I think people should understand, libraries should understand, it does not have to be a large and expensive collection. You can certainly start small. If you're thinking about having a tool library, you can start with some shovels and rakes and move up as is possible to you. However, a couple other things to look into in addition to grants is to work with local service clubs and businesses to find sponsors and, of course, donors. The challenge that you're going to face and that we face is sustainability. So no matter what your collection is, you have to consider the cost of maintaining and updating it. With tools, that includes the cost to repair items, as well as the manpower behind the scenes to catalog the items, promote the items. And as we've moved into we're going on our second year in March of having the tool library. We have definitely identified there are certain tools that need replacement parts a little more often than others, and some that need regular sharpening and items such as that. So that we have started to build into our budget, and it comes out of our collection budget, the same place where books and DVDs come out of. So again, I kind of referred to this a little bit, but time and staff. It's going to take time to purchase the items, process, catalog, create the procedures, train all the staff, and more. I think that a lot of us overlook the fact that staff time is money. So consider the time not only to begin it, to start off with staff and materials, but to maintain it. The other thing that was fantastic for us is that we had these Vista volunteers, but I will fully admit that they perhaps were not as trained as they should have been in library procedures. They were great at recognizing what tools to get, but they didn't understand our cataloging system. So we should have invested some more time to tell them more specifically what details we needed. Again, a lot of things learned in this process, and that goes into the challenge. So knowledge and expertise is necessary. Unique collections are great, but if you have a staff full of people who don't know how to use them, how are your patrons going to use them? That's exactly what we found when we started those infrared thermometers and Excel energy meters. Nobody knew how to use them. So if a patron came up and asked us, it was very unlikely they were going to end that situation checking out the item. So with the tool library and with our other unique collections, we have definitely invested a lot of time into training the staff, not just on how to check out the item, but a general idea of how these items work. We're not expecting them to be experts, but they should have some basic knowledge of the collection. And that is not different than anywhere else. Your staff should know the difference between a nonfiction and a fiction book. So we hope that they know the difference between a handsaw and a rake. It's very minimal to some extent, but it is also, when you're considering unique collections, whether it's technology or tools, it's not a bad idea to include some training from people outside the library who might be able to come in and show you some tips and tricks to take care of your collection. A big thing for a lot of libraries, and something that can be somewhat insurmountable, is space. So you're going to want to consider not just where you're going to store these, but what do they need to be stored in. You can't just send out a Dremel kit in a baggie. You probably want to put it in a box. You want to do something like that. When we started our collection for e-readers, one of the things that we did not consider was, how are we going to charge them when they came back? Of course, we asked the patrons to have them charged, but I would say 80% of the time they are returned with low batteries. So we didn't have one designated location where everything could charge. So those kinds of things, similar with tools, we needed to make sure that we had a place where they could be plugged in and checked. Just consider your space options. And that is a challenge. Like I said, you need to make the space. If your proposed unique collection is fulfilling a need within your community, you should try to make that space. Be creative. I had a board member at the time tell me, everyone's going to tell you that they can't spare any of their space until you show them that they can. And sometimes that means going through all those boxes that are stacked up somewhere and making room. In our case, we ended up splitting our tool library into 2 locations. We have smaller tools in a closet, and we have larger tools in our garage. This is already becoming an issue for us. It's a little confusing for staff, and we're running out of room. So again, we're going to be analyzing in 2020, how can we make this easier? Where can we move this? And we're going to get a little creative. So the next part, which is definitely not the most fun, but the most necessary perhaps, is policies, procedures, and training. We all know that change can be hard for staff, whether that's changing your ILS system or changing our organizational chart, but throwing in a brand new collection is going to be hard to swallow. And one way to combat that is to consider every scenario you can think of. And sometimes you could say that this is looking on the negative side of things, but it really is important. Like, what are you going to do if somebody tries to shove a chainsaw in your book drop, even though you've told them, do not put them in the book drop? What are you going to do if somebody hurts themselves using a ladder they checked out from the library? Really need to talk with staff. That's the best thing I can say. We started telling staff about this months and months in advance, and I heard all the feedback, which was not usually great. It was a lot of negatives, just a lot of questions, and the best way to combat that is with knowledge. So be willing to adapt and make the staff aware that you are willing to adapt. And that goes into the next challenge, which is the unknown. I think librarians in general tend to be a little type A and like to have things planned and laid out for them. So the best solution that you can do is the best solution you can have is to be flexible. With our e-readers, this is probably one of the best examples. When we first started checking them out, we did not have any restrictions on how long a person had to have a library card. So the very first iPad we ever checked out, a person came in, got a library card, checked out an iPad, and never returned. That iPad is gone forever. So we learned we need to add a 90-day account status in good standing. Our tool library, when it comes to inspecting the tools when they're returned, we have had to train and retrain and be flexible on that. And that is definitely a big challenge for us. So getting into the how-to, before we even started cataloging, we had to identify some of the things I referred to. How are they going to be packaged and identified? How will they circulate? So we had to create the policy for checkout periods, fines, etc. How are we going to do call numbers, and where will they be stored? This is a new collection, so we can't exactly always rely on what we've done in the past and apply it to the new collection. You're going to have to be a little flexible. We did learn, and this was something from the infrared thermometers, for instance, that had a 2-week checkout. They were the only thing that had a 2-week checkout. We decided we were going to try to make everything as concise as possible. So we moved actually those into the tool library, made it a 1-week checkout, which is similar to our DVDs, could renew one time, which is similar to our DVDs. So trying to make things easier, but also understanding that handsaw is not going to check out the same way that a book is. Now into cataloging, and the first thing I must say is I am not a cataloger. If you have specific questions about cataloging, I do have the email information for our cataloger, Mary Wheeler, and I will take this moment to brag that I have the best cataloger in the state, if not the country, because she essentially became a tool expert, and that was beyond her job. So, unique items. Most likely you're going to need original cataloging for this. The Minot Public Library just recently created a board game library collection, which is great because that's what a lot of libraries are doing. And we were very fortunate that libraries like the Bismarck Public Library had already created these and shared them in OCLC. I believe that Mary has created records for many of these tools and made them available. But again, I can double check that if anyone's interested. So a lot of this is going to depend on your OPAC. We use Atrium, which for the most part we're very happy with, but you're going to want to consider some different subject headings to make it very searchable. Also, you're probably going to, if it's a big collection, you may want to consider a print catalog. We do have a print catalog at our front desk in the adult services area, so if people would prefer, they can just come to the desk and flip through that. The other thing with cataloging is, first of all, you have to know your collection. And this is where Mary came in to become very familiar with these tools and not just know what they were called, but know what other names they may go by, what procedures were used for putting them together and how they worked. And of course, depending on your ILS, you're going to have some kinks to work through. Our system is designed for records of books and media, which most of us are. They're not exactly ideal for tablets and power tools. However, Mary did find some tricks to make this possible. So one of the things that we found out is a lot of tools are commonly called something, but their official name by no way is that. We have basically a high-powered floor fan available to check out. That would be used, for instance, if you were cleaning carpets or drying floors from a water issue. It's actually called a blower, not a fan, but she made sure that the word fan was in there as a parallel title, so if somebody was searching our OPAC, it would still come up. So, cataloging. This detail, which is up before you, is our Dremel 3000 speed rotary tool. Really small handheld tool, but it has a ton of pieces in it. So, for the staff checking in the item, but also for the patron who wants to check out the item, it could be really important to know what this Dremel comes with. So there are Dremels that are used for sanding as well as for grinding, and each of the items that it comes with are going to be included in the catalog. And then we also have a media link under that media tab that will have the instruction manual that can be linked to. The instruction manual is included with each of the tools when necessary. Obviously, a rake doesn't have one, but it's also available to us to reprint if we need to, because we determined we would not charge for reprinting the procedure manual. So, post cataloging, you want to make sure that your records are accurate, so that whatever is being checked out is actually what is in the online catalog. This is just as much for staff, if not more so. So if something does go missing, it doesn't mean that that Dremel, for instance, can't be checked out, but you want to make sure to update the record to remove any pieces that may have been damaged. Again, they may not get returned, or consumable items are going to get used up. For the most part, we are including some amount of consumables. So we have a lot of sanders, for instance. We purchased a lot of sanding paper, whether it was the pads that go on the round sanders or the belts for the belt sanders, and we try to include them, one or two in each package. But we also expect that the patrons who are checking them out will be having to purchase their own. Again, it's still saving them from having to buy the whole tool themselves. And we've actually found that some tools are coming back with extras. So that's been kind of a nice surprise. So then the next thing is promoting. We all probably ask ourselves this: how do we tell people about all the great things we do? And what use is our collection if nobody knows about it? The thing we found is that this was very unique. There was a lot of hype and a lot of excitement about a tool library. And I would say the first month was news articles and interviews and lots of great things. And yet still today, I hear people say, you can check out tools at the library, almost the same way they ask us, you can download books at the library. And that's just to be expected. It's an ongoing part of the job. It's creating our ability to be flexible and imaginative with our promotions, and also trying to figure out how to have programming that maybe goes along and helps increase our promotions. So with that being said, I do have some good resources that we used personally here as we were setting up our policies and procedures for the tool library. One thing I also will include is that everyone who checks out from our tool library has to be 18 or over and has to have had a card with us in good standing for 90 days. They do have to sign a liability waiver, which I had our city attorney help draft. The first draft of this liability waiver was 6 pages because it was an attorney. So we got it down to 2 pages front and back, but it is still very important, especially with something like tools when people could hurt themselves. Otherwise, I think that is all I have, but I am happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
I'm not seeing any come up, but I have one. Do you check out the tools through interlibrary loan?
That is a really good question, and no. It's not to say that, to be honest, Angie, I don't even think we've ever considered it. I think that mailing it would be very hard. And so we just haven't explored that. I think if a request were to come through, we would maybe consider it, but Yeah, it would be really hard to to mail something like that, I suppose. Anything else? I think I saw somebody had a raised hand. I'm not sure if I can unmute people or not.
Victoria, I've unmuted you if you want to ask your question.
I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm chatting to it. Here we go.
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Hi, Victoria.
Oh, okay, cool. It was more of a, can we get the list of those resources that you've had sent to us after this? Like all the stuff regarding I had to find my notes.
I think,
Everything
yeah.
regarding like the just pretty much all the resources and any links that you've used, will they be sent to us after this?
Yes, I'll be sending out the slides that have all the
Yay!
hyperlinks in it.
All right, awesome. That's really all I wanted to know.
All right, we have another question. So with the cataloging portion, just to clarify, and this is from Maribel, because I feel like I must have misunderstood, do you set up a subject section category? And is the call number not Dewey Decimal System? Is it a different system?
That is a really good question. The first question I'm not sure about. And no, our call numbers are not Dewey Decimal. We have just created basically a number system. So we have handheld tools and we have large tools. So we have two different sections, and then they are numbered 1 through however many we have, with sections available in the center. I was going to see if I could pull up our catalog. So the first question, Maribel, I'm not sure if I understand because I'm not a cataloger. So feel free to jump in, but I'm going to, so this is just a random thing I chose. This is what our summary looks like. Our detail is a little more helpful maybe. Is this helping at all? Again, our cataloger's email address is on the information Angie's sending out, and I think she would be able to answer these a little better than I can.
She did clarify. She said with subject section category, she means the authority records, the subjects of the category, such as a fiction book may have fiction and Western as the subject, if that makes more sense.
Yes. And yes, we did do that as best as we could. So yeah, it would be tool, and I don't know if this is a good example of it. But yeah, that is the guideline we used when cataloging, if that helps.
Maribel says thank you. Are there any other questions?
One thing I will say, because I get this question a lot, is how do you replace them? How do you check them? And this has been probably the hardest part of the tool library, is that we do have a different staff member assigned Monday through Friday to inspect the tools that were returned the day before. So they're checked in from the patron's account and then checked out to what we call mending until somebody can inspect it. And sometimes that inspection process can be very challenging. We check out a carpet cleaner that has to be dried and all the debris needs to be cut away. And we expect the patron to do this, but as many of us probably know, that doesn't always happen. So we will charge like a $5 cleaning fee if we feel that it was extensively dirty. But sometimes it's just a matter of all of these staff members have to kind of understand how the tool works so that they know it is working correctly. We had I think it was a circulating saw return not too long ago that was just kind of making a funny noise when it came back in. And we did have our building maintenance person look at that and determine that there was something loose on it. So it is very challenging. That's probably been the most challenging part.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, I want to say thank you, Janet, for presenting this. I know it's very informative, and though not everyone was able to attend, there's a lot of interest in this subject. I will be sending out the slides for everyone, and I'll send out the recording as soon as I have it available. And if you have any questions, I will include Janet's email in that email. So I think we are set. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you all so much.